Hello, Dr. Roberts. So this is the presentation for the global social problem of suicide for SOC 510 stratification from global perspectives. Like I said, my name is Lexton Bunting, and let's go ahead. So to cover this, I first want to cover Durkheim's theory of suicide. So there's going to be two spectrums and four types of suicide that he talks about in his 1897 book on suicide. The first one is social integration, which is the measurement of collective goals, purpose, and consciousness in a social system. So these two types of suicide related to social integration would be egoism, which would be on the low social integration scale. That means dedication to individuals rather than collective, and interaction is limited. So when individuals do not have contact with their social system and it is very individualistic, that goes towards egoism. For altruism, that is high social integration. So that means dedication to the collective. They are able to sacrifice oneself for the betterment of the collective. You can see this, and Durkheim even alludes to it in his book on suicide from 1897 with the army. The second spectrum is social regulation. So that is the measurement in which society has control over the individual. Anami is low social regulation. So the social system, it has weak control over the individual, and the future is controlled by a person's actions rather than the institutional policy. So that's most commonly observed type of suicide. You really get this from businessmen and others who are they don't feel a lot of control within their life there. And then with fatalism, that's high social regulation. So that's the social system determines the individual's future and has full control over their future. So with suicide and socioeconomic status, modern studies, indicate higher suicide rates in lower to middle income classes and are influenced by factors such as race, sex, occupation, and location. Suicide rates in Japan, South Korea, Finland, and Russia are high among middle class men. Due to modernization and economic changes, they're actually seeing a rise in these four countries within the last 10 years. Then economic booms and economic depressions also cause increased rates of suicide regardless of economic status. So this does go into the full range of the socioeconomic statuses and classes of all citizens within that country. And then there is a unidirectional relationship that exists between national wealth and suicide rates. So wealthy nations often see higher rates, which is interesting. Second, so suicide in gender. In 2022, the male suicide rate was 23 per 100,000 in the U.S., and it was nearly 4 times as higher than the female rate, which is 5.9 per 100,000. The male suicide rates worldwide are more than double female rates, often linked to occupational competition and economic hardships. Traditional marriage rules also reduce male suicide rates, but can increase female rates until childbirth. This paper also talks about females who are married and are childless actually have more suicide or have a higher suicide rate than single women, which is very interesting there. Rising divorce rates also correlate to increased male suicides and decrease for female suicides. With suicide and ethnicity, so non-Hispanic natives have the highest suicide rate, which is 27.1 per 100,000, followed by whites, which is 17.6, and then Pacific Islanders, which is 14.3. Black adolescents and young adults experience higher suicide rates, while whites have a higher suicide rate to middle to late adulthood. William Wilson's deindustrialization theory actually links increased black suicide rates to crime, poverty, and female-headed household in post-industrialized cities, usually across the U.S. And then native-born Hispanics in the U.S. also have a lower suicide rate than foreign-born Hispanics that are influenced by different racial comparisons. So native-born Hispanics usually compare themselves economically to African Americans, while foreign-born Hispanics that are born in the United States often compare themselves to whites for economic status there. For our sociological conclusion, I wanted to give a global suicide overview. So suicide is the third most common cause of death for ages 15 to 29 worldwide, and it's the 11th leading cause of death in the U.S., rising by 37% just over the past 20 years. For sociological causes, there are contemporary theories that link suicide to socioeconomic factors such as unemployment, economic mobility, occupational prestige, and especially older men. Traditional gender roles also expose men to higher suicide rates, so societal expectations to provide is that kind of traditional role, action, and responsibility there. They're also more prone to economic fluctuations just because we see men more in the workforce than women. There are rapid cultural changes that can lead to increased suicide rates. We can see this with the Inuit tribe in Canada. And I just wanted to put that this is a example of Durkheim's theory of social regulation, just because they're not able to control those institutional cultural changes from their government in Canada. For sociological trends and prevention, so suicide prevention measures such as suicide prevention call centers, which can be seen observed in multiple countries, are not shown to decrease suicide rates. Suicide challenges both dependency theory and modernization theory as both globalization theories. Suicide rates are increasing in post-industrialized countries due to higher divorce rates and economic fluctuations there. Increased female workforce participation and widening wage gaps may elevate suicide rates for both genders also. So the social media campaigns for suicide, there are two that I wanted to say here. So the first one is the CDC. So they have a suicide prevention resource for action plan. The strengths here is implementing institutional policy changes nationally and cross-nationally. They are playing on a global scale here. The other one is a multifaceted approach through healthcare, education, and policy reforms. The weaknesses here, or the gap, so to say, is that it does not provide a practical solution for the predominant demographic that we see for middle-class white males facing suicide in post-industrial countries. That's kind of our main demographic that we're facing here. The second one is International Association for Suicide Prevention. This is a non-governmental organization here that does real-world application of suicide prevention through mental health treatment in lower-income nations. The weaknesses here, which is the same as the suicide prevention resource for action, is that it does not provide a practical solution for predominant demographic of middle-class white males in post-industrialized countries. So for the social media campaign, and I tacked onto this the nonprofit organization that I would be creating to assess those weaknesses that we covered in the last slide, is first awareness. So this would be a 6-month social media campaign to explain sociological causes of suicide and prevention through community measures, economic resources, and education. The second would be fundraising and organization implementation. So working with churches and other social campaigns and fundraising websites, we would gain funding to create a nonprofit corporate organization focused on creating a community for middle-class men for post-industrial countries through human resources departments. The third would be action and prevention. So the nonprofit organization for suicide will include lectures on suicide susceptibility, bi-monthly community events for increasing social integration, economic resources and economic fluctuations just to prevent that. And counseling could be recommended for suicide within this nonprofit organization. So for reflection, I wanted to answer, what does becoming a social change agent mean to you? It means three things to me. The first one is social agents actively seek out institutional and cultural inequalities and implements awareness movements and education to combat inequalities. The second would be that we should also observe and consider the social indicators of socioeconomic status, such as socioeconomic status, gender, and ethnicity when formulating a plan to decrease inequality. The third one should also a social change agent should also adopt a humanistic approach that focuses on inclusivity and empathy, promoting equality, justice, and forgiveness. Coming from a Christian worldview, I really wanted to put that the three major facets that I see as a social change agent, which would be that equality, justice, and forgiveness there. Secondly, how does this align with your chosen career? So as an educator and counselor in a corporate environment, or working as an admissions counselor here at Grand Canyon Education, I strive to be a social change agent addressing the cultural and institutional inequalities many of my customers and students face. We're getting a lot of students across socioeconomic status, across gender, and across ethnicity. So you really do have to pay attention to what inequalities they are facing on a day-to-day basis and institutionally. Also, by understanding inequality stratification and creating intentional change in my occupational environment, I really want to strive to develop a climate of equality concerning suicide prevention, gender, and ethnicity. If implemented, the nonprofit suicide education and prevention organization that I talked about in the past two slides just can help my workplace become more inclusive, disable the taboos around suicide prevention, and just create a stronger community for increased social regulation there. Awesome. So I want to thank you for attending. I do want to say, for more information or questions, please reach out to me at this email address. Thank you so much, Dr. Roberts, for your time and guidance this past 8 weeks. It's really been a pleasure just to get your input and wisdom on a lot of things. I do want to say that I did include my references here. I know they are not each one is in APA format. I just wanted to list them out there. I could not paste them in there just because it goes beyond the slideshow. But thank you so much, Dr. Roberts, and I hope you have a great weekend. Bye-bye.